Hello, everybody. My name is Kelsey Lander, and I am here today because we have an epidemic facing deaf children across this country. This is that 75% of deaf children are mainstreamed into public hearing schools with no specialist support in place. To give you a look into their everyday life, I'm going to say something. What I said was raise your hand if you can understand me, but notice how there is not one hand raised. With no easily accessible language available to these deaf children, they are unable to develop to their fullest potential. I believe that the bilingual approach of teaching is the best way to not only educate deaf children, but also instill confidence in them. The approaches that are commonly used besides solely mainstreaming deaf children into hearing schools are auditory oral, total communication, and bilingual bicultural. Auditory oral uses lip reading, speech, and usually assistance from listening devices. These would be either cochlear implants or hearing aids. Total communication usually consists of simultaneous signing and speaking, both in English word order. Bilingualism teaches deaf students both ASL and English separately and does not require speech. This also gives them insight into their culture. Bilingualism is the method that should be used when educating deaf children because it helps them develop cognitively, emotionally, and culturally. Deaf children need sign language that bilingualism provides in order to set a foundation for language. It has been found that many deaf children who are raised using only spoken language do not receive enough access to auditory information to develop language. This is crucial because if a child does not fully acquire a language by the age of 5, it is unlikely for their brain to develop true fluency in any language. This makes it key for children to have ASL that bilingualism provides. This is so that they are not language deprived. While having sign language incorporated into it, total communication is not conducive at providing a child with real language. This is because they use sign language in the same word order as English, which is not real ASL. Without an accessible way to grasp the spoken language coupled with it, total communication leaves a child with no real language. Oralism gives them little to no chance to grasp language that they desperately need. And this is because, with no sign language involvement in it, it is very inaccessible. Without a bilingual setting, deaf children are also inclined to suffer emotionally. 96% of deaf children are born to hearing parents who are likely to force spoken language onto them. These children who live and go to school in verbal settings often report feelings of isolation. It has also been found that the more that deaf children lack access to communication, the more depressive symptoms that they have. This could have all been prevented if these deaf children were raised and taught in a bilingual setting. Bilingualism is also commonly referred to as bi-bi because it is both bilingual and bicultural. Like any other language, sign language has its own culture. This includes deaf literature, history, art, values, and etc. A child having deaf culture creates a sense of belonging, community, and pride for them, which is very important. Mainstreaming, oralism, and even total communication settings repress deaf culture. These methods try to make deaf kids behave more hearing, when in reality there is nothing wrong with being deaf. In a bi-bi setting, deaf children will be able to have pride in who they are. Even with all this being said, some still view auditory oral as the best approach. Supporters believe that the auditory oral approach facilitates development of reading and writing skills because proficiency in English language is critical to developing good reading ability. In reality, studies have found that deaf children with access to sign language had significantly higher scores in spelling and vocabulary than deaf students with no access to sign language. This shows that deafness alone has no correlation with academic ability. Plus, access to sign language will only further their language skills because it is the most accessible. The bilingual approach is best for developing deaf children both cognitively and emotionally. Unfortunately, deaf children everywhere are put into environments where they are unable to flourish. One of the biggest reasons that this happens is because 96% of deaf children are born to hearing parents who are uneducated on deaf culture. I urge you to first change your perspective that deaf children need to be fixed. And second, support bilingualism. Having access to sign language does nothing but give deaf children the most accessible way to acquire language. And why would you not want your child to have the best chance at developing language, which they so desperately need? Thank you very much for your time.